Hello all, my name is Hannah White and I'm the workforce coordinator here at the Kansas Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund. I am currently renaming myself because I have to do this for every meeting. And I'm joined today by Megan Broha. So she'll be controlling the chat, putting links in for all of you, and then answering any questions if I'm not able to see the screen. But we're really happy to have you here for our last webinar of the year. We've got some fun stuff happening. As you know, we've been talking quite a lot about home visiting here in the last few months. And so Kansas Parents and Teachers Association has agreed to come on and tell us all about their organization and their mission and goals. And then I'm going to also provide you all with an update to the career pathway work, which we envision going live at the beginning of next year. So very timely. A couple of updates just to get us started. Until December 16th, the Children's Cabinet will be accepting applications for the Early Childhood Block Grants. This is a really huge funding source that's funded through the CIF, or the Children's Initiative Fund. And this is funding for FY24, just as a reminder. So it would start, I believe, June 23 and run through. So it's not for this year. There's really great guidance if you're an eligible program and you would like to apply for this. There's really wonderful guidance in the RFP, and that can be found on our website. But just as a reminder, to be eligible for ECBG funding, you have to be a 501c3, a county or city entity, or part of a USD, so a unified school district. But again, we're taking submissions until December 16th at 5. So if you've not done that, go ahead and get it in. And there still is TA available. So Childcare Aware of Kansas has some really, really interesting grant opportunities right now for coalition building. I know that we've talked recently about initiatives like Thrive and other coalitions and other advocacy groups that are happening in our state. And so this is a way to kind of shore up those investments. So existing coalitions in Kansas can request up to $45,000 through this funding stream. And then communities that don't have an existing coalition can request $2,000 to start those initial activities. So if you're in a community that started these conversations and you're looking for funding, you can find all of the information on the Childcare Aware of Kansas website, but a really interesting funding opportunity. So we are, I believe, at the end of eligibility for, open application for the workforce appreciation bonus. And the period that we, I believe, are just done with is that relative care, and then anybody who has not applied. Megan's going to drop all of the links related to this effort, but we did have an update from Michelle Allen, who is in charge of the CCDF relief funding, and she was able to tell us that I think about 13,000 eligible childcare staff had applied as of, it would have been about 2 weeks ago. So certainly not the 20,000 that were estimated at the beginning, but still a pretty wide reach for our childcare providers across Kansas. And then we have a few professional development opportunities to highlight for you. So for those of you that are Kansas Parents as Teachers members, these trainings are free. And so every month they're going to highlight a different topic. This month is positive supports and the impact on family well-being. And then January, they'll be discussing oral health, followed by racial equity in February. So a nice diverse offering from Capata. And then we also have some additional opportunities from this agency. You can see that there's some domestic violence highlight there in March, followed by child abuse and neglect. And then May, we don't have the date, but it will be substance use disorder. We also have the Power of Possibilities annual Kansas Division for Early Childhood that's coming up. So that conference opportunity is February 22nd to the 24th in Wichita. And we will update you when we have registration links and any information about if there's funding to attend, but we will update you in our all-in email every week. And now I'm going to turn it over to Callie Hoffman and Hillary Kane with Capata. They're going to give us an overview of the Kansas Parents as Teachers Association.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Hannah. You did some of our slide work, but we'll repeat it because it helps to hear it a couple times, right? Which we appreciate you including that. So for those of you that don't know about Capata, we're just going to give a brief overview of our association and some of the work that we've been focused on this last year. So Capata is the Kansas Parents as Teachers Association. We are a statewide organization. We focus on leadership, professional development, advocacy to help build quality programs in Kansas. Membership is open to anyone. You don't have to be tied to a Parents as Teachers program. You just have to agree with our mission that home visiting makes a difference in Kansas kids and families' lives. So I am Callie Hoffman. I am the executive director of the Kansas Parents as Teachers Association. I am also the director for the USD 368 Payola Consortium. And I will let Miss Hillary introduce herself.
Hello, I'm giggling because Callie's in short sleeves and I look like I'm bundled up for a winter storm because I am chilly today. I do not like when the weather changes. So we're excited to be sharing with you today. I work with Capata as the Quality Implementation Director for our Bright Futures program and support programs across the state of Kansas. And I'm also the coordinator for our Capata affiliate program with parent educators on staff. They are also spread out across Kansas.
All right, so just to highlight, my role is really on the advocacy work for Capata and our partnering agencies. So wanted to highlight that in 2022, some of the things that we have been working on is ensuring that we provided training support for model fidelity for parents as teachers. There's rigorous requirements the National Center puts out, and we evaluated those and have provided those, as you saw Hannah highlight in what our training path looks like, and Hillary will go into more detail with that as well. We also created and shared out a packet of development information for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and that can also be found on our website if you're doing work with those age groups. Would have you linked over to that. Thanks for sharing that link. Megan, you're quick on that. And then our advocacy relationships in Topeka that we've been a part of since the year 2000 continue to be the center of a lot of the work that we do. We also hosted a conference in April that brought many of the parent educators for parents as teachers and other programs together, and we will be doing that again this coming spring. A highlight that a lot of our programs have enjoyed is that we provide the annual payment for their affiliation fees so that they don't have that financial burden. And we have, thanks to the Family First Prevention Act, been able to provide nearly $500,000 to local programs who serve Bright Futures families. I'm going to go to the next slide and Hillary will dive into our training pass.
All right, so I'm going to give you the rundown of everything there is to know about Capata training, and I'm excited to share it with you today. A couple of different things to get started. You can see here that Capata offers a training pass, an annual training pass for $40. That also includes your Capata membership. And included in this are several things. One of the main ones being that we have monthly high quality trainings for home visitors and early childhood professionals. A really nice part about that is that currently, obviously, because we're doing things in virtual format too via Zoom, we have those recorded. So even if you're not able to be present for the training that day, you are able to go back on and watch it. Or if you want to go back and revisit it, that's also available. And that's been really nice. We also are prioritizing that the schedule is sent out for the program year in advance. We try to get it out every year at the beginning of the summer so that programs can plan for not only schedules for those that would want to attend, but also around support for staff and an extension of training in staff meetings and so on within agencies. Something that I think is really important to share about our training is that this training plan is not to just check off professional development boxes. And I know that it's easy to sort of become that way when we have to provide certain number of hours per training each year. But this training is really designed by the trainer with my support and insight for the needs of our current members. And we take a lot of pride in surveying members and finding out what's going on, what do we really need right now, what support is needed to be addressed, and then making sure that trainings are designed around those needs. Something else is that, as Callie mentioned, we do have specific areas for parents as teachers that we have to meet training in order to have model fidelity. And those areas include child abuse and neglect, diversity, equity, and inclusion, intimate partner violence, caregiver and child health and wellness, and substance use disorder. However, even though we have those training requirements for each year, we make sure that those are also not trainings that are just on repeat. We build on those from year to year and then implement different components and pieces in order to provide support in between those trainings as well. Membership also includes, you can see up there at the top of our slide, a monthly newsletter that has legislative updates, funding and job opportunities, and highlights from things that are going on with PAT programs around the state. Also allows for an opportunity not only in trainings, but also at our annual conference and at other offerings to have network connections with those in the field. And then, as I was sharing before, access to the membership drive. And one of the pieces on the membership drive is those past recorded trainings that are really important. So what I wanted to do is just share with you, you can see up in the left-hand corner, our training schedule. And I realize that's hard to read. It's just little teeny tiny print. So I wanted to give you just a quick, I say quick, but a good idea of what we've offered for trainings this year. So you can have a better understanding of what that training content really looks like. So I'm kind of just going to go through each of our trainings and share a little bit about what we've covered and why we felt like that was important and the impact that it has had. So in July, we always do a kickoff for CAPATA members with a podcast because we know that July is a very busy time of year. This allows for those in the field to kind of listen while they work, and it's our summer kickoff. This year's podcast was about the importance of having self-compassion in order to support the work that we're doing in the field, avoid burnout, and avoid secondary compassion fatigue, which we know is very real. And then we always kind of offer a follow-up discussion around that. And so that's a nice piece of that for professionals to talk with each other. Our August training was centered around Teeth for Two with the Oral Health Coalition of Kansas. And this training focused on overall wellness, starting with the mouth, and the importance that educators play in parents' understanding and awareness of oral health. Some of the focus highlights from that training included oral health during pregnancy, infant oral health, and oral disease prevention. September, we had discussion around breastfeeding and maternal mental health with Brenda Bandy from the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition. And this was part one in a series about perinatal mental health. So that's something else that we really tried to do with these trainings is build on them and not just have it be a one and done. This training focused on how breastfeeding supports maternal mental health and has an impact on the whole family. Breastfeeding also mitigates the impact of poor maternal mental health on child's mental health. And so Brenda did a great job of being able to share that content with us. In October, we had perinatal mental health as our part two of that session with Taryn Zweigart from Motherhood Unpacked. She works with therapy services for those that are navigating the journey to and through motherhood. And this focused on risk factors for perinatal mental health issues and concerns, screenings and next steps for support once an educator has completed a screening, and perinatal mental health and its impact, meaning the whole family. So that was kind of a new component for a lot of our staff that we really talked a lot about fathers and the impact and how that all relates with perinatal mental health. So lots of good discussion. In November, we had ACEs training with one of our partners, Kansas Children's Service League. And this was a brief recap. Many of our staff obviously have had ACEs training at this point, but this was a recap of the adverse childhood experiences, followed by the screening of the resilience film. If you haven't seen that before, it's amazing. And it talks about the chronicles of promising beginnings of the national movement to prevent childhood trauma, treat toxic stress, and improve the health of future generations. And it really was a refresher opportunity, but they did a great job. And we do in many of our trainings of allowing a lot of time for discussion and networking. And so we had a lot of great discussion around that topic as well. As Hannah stated before, in December, we have a training that's coming up, and it is positive behavior supports and the impact on family well-being. That is being provided by Katie Rader with Endear Education Family Support Agency. And the focus for that training is going to be on self-regulation and the brain for both adults and children, empathy, encouragement, and positive assumptions, and choices, consequences, mindfulness, and attention as tools and supports for family well-being. Then in the new year, we start with oral health training with Topeka parent educator Veronica Bird from the Oral Health of Kansas Committee. She is going to be talking about the importance of oral health discussion as a home visitor and educator, tips and tricks to integrate into our current conversations with families, and that oral health is not just a February thing for families, as we're all guilty of doing sometimes. So then in February, we have training around racial equity, a foundation of understanding with Karen Howard from Crossover Partners Agency. And she's going to be doing a lot of things. She's really personalized this training for our needs. One of them being that we are doing a survey prior to training so that we can definitely make sure that this training is really centered around where everyone is with their stage and personal racial equity awareness. So talking to our members first about that. How does diversity, equity, inclusion fit into your organization's mission and plans? And what have you done as an agency to really plan for that and think about it? And a shared language of racial equity terms and their meaning, including the 4 levels of racism: personal, interpersonal, institutional, and structural. In March, we have domestic violence training, impacts on youth with the Kansas Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence and Christina Scott. That training is going to focus on the potential impacts of domestic violence on youth, identifying risk factors for youth exposed to domestic violence, and protective factors for youth who are exposed to domestic violence. Then in April, we have our child abuse and neglect training with KCSL. That's our important annual training with reminders and updates about reporting. And then in May, we do offer a substance use disorder training. That is from Brazelton Touchpoint Center. And this year, it's going to focus on ways to value families' passion as an engagement strategy for supporting families with substance use disorder concerns, and identifying a family's passion or strategies to do so and implement the change in order to get the help that they need. And kind of also how to reframe a family's passion for the benefit of family partnerships and how important those are in that journey to support families that are going through substance use disorder concerns. Callie mentioned briefly, but I just want to share again that we do have our upcoming spring conference, and that is April 17th and 18th. This year, it will be held in Salina, so centrally located for people to get to easily. And our focus this year and theme is Heroes, Hurdles, and Hope. And the whole idea of the conference is that those who attend will leave feeling empowered and hopeful for the work that we do every day with families. All right, you can go on to the next slide. All right. So one thing that we wanted to share today is that CAPADA training, as I said, is really organized and planned around the needs of our members, and not just the needs of our members when they join, but the needs of our members as things develop and progress throughout program years and as different needs arise and so on. So our training schedule is really designed to support professional development for all of those in the early childhood field. And obviously, as I just shared with you, we're currently meeting PT model requirements where there is an extensive overlap that will support the needs of other early childhood models as well. We are very open to feedback from all of our members in order to include and expand training in order to best support the program model needs. So whichever program that you're working with, we want to make sure that we can meet those training needs as well. And we know a lot of those are going to be very similar to what we're already offering with our Parents as Teachers model. As I shared before, an important part of our training planning and planning for membership needs is the staff completing a survey. And I know everybody's always kind of, when they get those, like, oh, another survey, great, I get to complete something else. And if you're like me, you kind of put it off to the last minute. But we try to make sure that we really do emphasize the importance of that, because that's what we build the training around. And we want to make sure that we're meeting those next step training needs for staff. Something for those of you who may be considering Kapata membership in order to be able to support training needs for your staff to know is that after each training, we have a feedback form that they fill out. We're happy to share that with anyone that would need that content for your staff. And they also receive a certificate of attending the training, which I know is always kind of important to everyone. So I wanted to share that. So in the chat, one thing that Callie and I would just love to hear and would love for you to share with us today is, what are your current needs for training? And what is difficult or challenging to meet for those training needs? What has gotten stale or seems to be training on repeat? So if you take just a minute and just type that in the chat, that would be helpful feedback to hear. All right, and Callie, as people are entering in things, if we get some feedback on there, then I'll share that in a minute, but I'll let you go ahead and take on the next slide.
Very good. Thank you, Hillary. It's always exciting to hear you go through that again. It's just amazing what is able to be offered in a year's time, and again, for $40 membership. So that's where this slide comes in, is that it is because of the network that we're able to provide those trainings at such a low cost to folks, is that there's a great group of people that have joined in and paying that membership fee to allow that. And we want to be able to continue to extend that out. We have truly seen the benefit and the impact that it's having on our staff. They give us much praise back, but I'd say the most impactful praise back is the comfort that it gives them and able to deliver the Parents as Teachers program to the families, that these are truly are centered around and focused on what families are needing. And so we would like to continue to hear from you all, especially those of you in different models of things that we could consider to broaden our scope to be able to provide support for other programs. And I do see some are coming in.
So I'll just kind of hop on, Callie, and share. I saw that in the chat, someone had asked about a lot of our trainings are offered in the afternoons right now during the daytime, and asking if any of those would be available in the evening for daycare providers. The nice part about our trainings, I think there's only been one this year that we haven't been able to record, but they are all recorded. So if you have a Kapata membership, you would be able to go on and watch that training at any time that would work for you. And one thing to think about is that that would be available obviously also as a staff. So if you needed to go in and watch that in the evening, as a staff, I know even for my own staff, we have a 5 o'clock staff meeting, and we go in and can go on and watch trainings and things as needed. So those are available and recorded. So, and I'm seeing lots of good ideas coming in. One of the questions also that Hannah put in the chat is, are these training opportunities KDHE approved for clock hours? And that's one thing that our staff and organization has been talking about and working towards. So that's something that kind of is in the works right now, but they are not at the current time. And Rich, thank you. That's a great idea. I did do a screenshot of that, so I'd make sure that we have that as well. Jessica's talking about how she loves seeing the variety of trainings, and I do too. That was something that's really important to me as we put together this schedule of trainings, is that they are not just those trainings, like I said, on repeat that everyone's bored with and they don't pay attention to anymore because they've heard the content 10 times, 15 times, whatever. So we really try to build and keep it to have a lot of variety for training. So if you have other things that you want to add, you certainly can and reach out to myself or Callie, put it in on the Kapata website, but we're happy to hear feedback. We welcome the feedback and would appreciate it as things come to you. So
Thank you both so much for your time. Couple of things. First of all, let me apologize. My computer is glitching on another level, but I have all of my screens pulled up and there's no going back now. So secondly, I love seeing all of the diversity in your training opportunities, and it's very exciting to talk about maybe some potential for alignment with KDHE clock hours, especially as we talk about the career pathway, because we know that there are so many high quality training opportunities that exist that are just outside the scope of what's typically submitted for approval. So that's really exciting, and I'm glad that you mentioned that so I can remember to keep that on our work list. I will make sure that we have your contact information in the chat, so if people have questions, they can reach out. But just very grateful for both of you to come here and tell us about the Parents as Teacher model and just kind of the touch and feel of it. We know that home visiting is going to become more in the forefront in the next year, I would imagine, just based on especially in Kansas, based on the funding recommendation that we hope to put forward in the legislature. But then beyond that, we see the development of family resource centers and just a lot of tools being infused into the workforce and for our families and children along the same lines as home visiting. So very exciting. If you are part of another home visiting model, maybe MCH, maybe, I don't know, maybe one of the other ones out there, and you'd like to come and talk about your model and talk about kind of the strengths and what makes this model unique, we would love to hear from you. Just reach out to me and I will schedule you for a webinar and hopefully have less technical issues than I have today. Another thing I need to apologize for. We talked about the ECBG application. So that deadline has been extended to December 21st at 5 p.m. So it's a 5-day extension from the original December 16th deadline. So please forgive me for that failure to update our slide. It is the 21st at 5 p.m. So with that, we're going to move into just a career pathway update. We're going to walk through some visuals that are polished further than we've ever seen them. Feel free to put questions in the chat. With the number of screens that I have going, if you also just want to come off mute, that's totally fine too. So as you know, we've been working on developing a career pathway for childcare providers for about 2.5 years now. It's called out in a number of places, the strategic plan. It's part of the needs assessment that was conducted. This is just a need that we've had for years for our childcare providers. So a couple of things that the pathway is. It is a roadmap to help providers kind of map their experiences and advance through their profession. And one thing to keep just front of mind is that recommendations for professional learning hours on the career pathway have nothing to do with licensing requirements. So in some cases, they're actually above annual licensing requirements, but they do not change existing regulation or licensing in any way. They're separate. So ways that we see the career pathway really helping our infrastructure through recruitment and then retaining our existing workforce and sustaining the quality of programs. For recruitment, you'll see as I pull up some visuals that we have aligned trying to create that pipeline. So on the in the beginning of the career pathway, you'll see alignment with CTE and high school students or adults that are entering the workforce with a GED or a high school diploma. Another way that we think this will help recruit people into the workforce is by accepting just a diversity of lived experiences and work history. We know that childcare providers come from so many different walks of life, so many different specialties and expertise. And so we need to recognize that and really acknowledge how important that breadth of knowledge is that they're bringing to the field. Retaining, we envision the career pathway helping with retaining our existing workforce by recognizing the hard work that they do, using information that we can gather from both the career pathway and the workforce registry to articulate needs for pay parity and wages and stipends and the things that we know our workforce needs. But as of yet, we haven't been able to articulate to legislators and to decision makers because we don't have a representation of the full scale of how experienced our providers really are. So that's one way. There's also room for development in the future to create a mastery-based approach. So recognizing childcare providers that are that have none or just very little higher education, but they have a wealth of community-based learning, on-the-job experience, maybe some field-specific credentials. And then sustaining. So the work of the career pathway has encouraged us to do a lot of alignment work within the system. So looking at investments, looking at sustainability as far as funding. So moving away from some of the relief funding and the PDG funding that we're in right now into sustainable based on regular funding streams. So just really important conversations have been taking place over the last 2 years to make sure that we're setting Kansas up for success with the investments that we make now. Here are the design principles, and we've been working from these same principles since the very beginning. So we wanted to stay true to this because we thought that each of these were very important. So we've already said that we need to prioritize the current workforce. We've experienced an exodus of childcare providers throughout the pandemic. And that is detrimental not only to the development of our, youngest children in Kansas, but also to families and all of the other ways that childcare providers support just their communities, from people being able to go to work, children getting high quality care and education, etc. So we need to stop that. Excuse me. As I mentioned, we also think it's very important to experience diverse experiences. So whether or not that includes college education, and also allowing people to come into the pathway at multiple entry points. So somebody can come in after having 10 or 15 years in a completely different professional field, because we don't want to create any barriers to entry into the workforce. We also think and have thought from the beginning that it's very important that the career pathway and the professional development that is approved for the career pathway is aligned to core competencies. So at this point, that would be the Kansas, Missouri core competencies, but we heard, as you all probably did, that we are moving away from those and we are going to adopt and adapt the Nebraska core competencies. So in the future, that professional development will need to be aligned. Multiple entry points, as I said, and you'll see it on the visuals that I share, that a person really could come in from any walk of life as long as they have those basic requirements, and just bring their lived experiences with them. We also think that coaching and mentoring are two ways that we can help with application of knowledge, help to sustain high quality providers by giving them those supports. And especially with mentoring, we think we can actually use that as a way to recognize providers who are already doing that. So we know that a lot of mentorship is already happening in the field, unpaid mentorship. And so we want to really investigate the resources that we already have, the peer-to-peer mentorship that's already taking place, and then build upon that based on the needs of the workforce. And then each level really should be meaningful and attainable just all by itself. So these levels don't have to build on one another. A person could certainly go through progressively, but they don't have to. You can come in at any point. And I already kind of mentioned this, but the career pathway and kind of the importance of getting this work off the ground now has a lot to do with the other investments and the other opportunities that are happening in our state. So we recently just entered into a formal contract with a vendor to create our workforce registry. The career pathway will align with that, needs to, because the career pathway and the way that we look at professional development in our state and what credentials are accepted will inform some of the functionality of the registry. So really, the two things go hand in hand. Development of a career pathway also meets CCDF state requirements, and then supports all of the interesting funding that we've had in the last 2 years. And it also, of course, advances this very specific point in the strategic plan where it says that we should develop a comprehensive career pathway. So just across the board, this is something that our childcare system has been asking for, and we hope is a great supplement. Okay, so I'm going to pull up real quick, well, not real quick because my computer is lagging, just a table that we have been working from. And I know that some of you have already seen this, and some of you have seen it probably way more than you ever thought you would or wanted to. And for that, I apologize. So just to be clear, this is not, and can you all see my screen? Nope. Yes. Okay. This is not the final visual product. This is not the polished version. This is just a table that we've been working from and iterating during our feedback sessions and our partner sessions, just to kind of articulate the parameters for each level. So this is not the final version, just to be clear. And let's see if I can actually zoom in. So on the left side, one of the things I want to call out is you can see that there's the NACI unifying framework is mentioned on the left side, and there is each of the levels on our career pathway do match up with the levels in the NACI framework. So there is potential for alignment in the future, but at this point, our existing workforce is not aligned with the Power of the Profession framework, and so we don't want to create equity issues by aligning to something that we don't necessarily have information to support. Because we don't have a workforce registry, we don't know the number of professionals that have, let's say, a CDA or an early childhood bachelor's, or national director's credentials. We just don't have that information. So there is potential for alignment with NACI, and you can see it on the left there. You can see that each level has kind of a traditional or an alternative, and the traditional is if there is higher education that's part of that path, and then the alternative is using on-the-job experience, professional learning, so community-based professional learning opportunities like KDHE clock hours, and then workforce-specific credentials like the CDA. So each level on the pathway is going to have choices for how somebody progresses, and it stays that way until we get to I'm struggling with this computer, I apologize. It stays that way until we get to level 5. So something very important that I want to call out is that at level 5, that's the highest that a person could get without higher education. So we have some substitutes that would equate to an associate's degree at level 5, like a provisional Kansas early childhood director credential or that national director credential. But at this point, we do not have options beyond level 5 for a non-higher ed path or equivalencies, if you will. So shooting back up to the top, I kind of talked about that pipeline a little bit, and this is where you see it in that pre-professional stage. So on the alternative level, we've aligned with the career and technical education program. So our CTE participants, we have, I believe, 95 CTE programs in Kansas that do early childhood. So that's a really wonderful way to expose young people to this workforce and to this type of work. There are some basic parameters around the amount of professional learning hours that somebody would have to have, even to be on that pre-professional. And the reason is to filter out people who are not actually in the workforce. So when the registry goes live, we need to have parameters to award incentives or stipends. And so that necessitation of a number of professional learning hours to get onto the pathway is that filtration method. So we're going to keep progressing through here, and really the most significant things that we believe we need to continue to invest in are, like I said, that coaching, small group advisory or participation in a community of practice, and then mentoring. So some of these you'll see it just says a meaningful amount. And so we did not actually make a recommendation for a certain amount of hours. That will be left up to the agency that is lead for implementation based on their subject matter expertise. We also have quite a few Kansas specific credentials that are on this career pathway, which we're very excited about. We have the CDA, as I've mentioned many times. We also have at level 4, the CDA with enhancements. And so that's the traditional CDA with some mandatory coaching and participation in one of those communities of practice. And we've already kind of talked about those additional credentials at the associate's level on the non-higher ed path. And then we also have traditional bachelor's degrees listed at 6 and 7, either with an emphasis or with it being an actual bachelor's degree in early childhood, or if it's not in early childhood, how that provider could equate. So in the future, we will be continuing to work on levels above the bachelor's degree, because we know that there are people in our workforce that have PhDs and master's degrees, but we don't really know how they fit within the career pathway for childcare providers at this moment. So that's future work. And let's slowly share again. Okay, and actually I'm going to, there we go. I think I'm live again now. Is that right? I apologize. I'm lagging so far behind. So I've kind of talked about the work that's been done to date over the last 2.5 years, and where we're at right now is we will be releasing the career pathway, which is, this is the visual. This is a version of the visual that will be released in January of next year. And so our soft launch will be releasing the pathway itself, along with some accompanying documents like FAQ, definitions, things like that, on the new All In for Kansas Kids website. And so we've been working over the last few months with a contractor named Orange Sparkleball, or OSB, and they've been doing all of the prettifying work that we need because we are not able to do that. So they've created a really wonderful set of pages to go onto the All In for Kansas Kids website, and there's information about how the career pathway fits with the larger system. There's just quite a lot of information on there, and I will walk you through that in a second. But this is just kind of at a glance what the career pathway looks like, and then within each of these shapes at each level, there's specific requirements for number of higher education credits, on the job experience, or number of professional learning hours, and if there's a credential that's required. So once this is live, a user will be able to hover over, and each box will expand to show the specific requirements of that level, like it's shown here. So this is the phase 1 implementation. This is January 23. And really, it's just going to be slowly releasing the pathway into the workforce. But our major priorities are to make sure that people understand what they're looking at, to make sure that our partners understand the career pathway. So just being very intentional about the supports that we're giving to our partners for messaging, people like surveyors who are going to be dealing with providers who have questions, TA that's normally offered through like childcare aware, those people need to be very comfortable with the content on the career pathway and be able to answer those questions. So we're releasing information into the workforce, and providers can use the career pathway tool independently, but our focus is going to be really making sure that as a system we're all on the same page and we were using the same language to talk about the pathway, and that everybody knows who's responsible for answering questions, so that our providers are not confused or overwhelmed. So a few of the things that will be released in January, I've already mentioned the 3 pages on the All In for Kansas Kids webpage. That will come with an interactive, like web-based version, so somebody can hover and kind of move through the pathway that way. We also have a printable PDF that will be all of the important information about the pathway on one page, so you can see the whole thing laid out with the parameters. We also have a framing and guidance, as well as those FAQs that I mentioned. And some of the companion documents would be definitions that we use across the website, so that if we say professional development, somebody has a very clear understanding of what we mean. And that promotion and marketing, so that would be mostly with our partners, mostly with how we're informing the system using the channels that we already have, and then creating a larger messaging campaign after the first iteration. And as I said, we need to, one of the things we need to be very clear about with our partners in this first release is where people go for information. So that will be, those kind of artifacts will be released in the beginning of January, just so that nobody's confused and our providers are able to get help. Okay, so I'm going to stop share. We're going to go to the not live version. This is a mock-up, if my computer will let me. This is a mock-up that was created by OSB. So it's not live, but this is what it will look like when it's live. And then we have to get this over to another partner and get it on the website. So all of this is happening in the background. All right, so this, if you can see it, I think that it's actually, I think it's live now. Okay, so this is what the website will look like, and this will be the landing page for providers for the career pathway. Let's see if I can. Sorry, I have to move some boxes around here. Okay, it might be compliant. Let's see if we can pull this up or not. Well, I'm not able to scroll, but I can walk through pieces of it. So like I said, we've got 3 pages that will be within the All In for Kansas Kids website. Once you get to the landing page for providers, this will be probably on the front. We have a couple more pieces that look like this top version that you can actually see, and it talks about what the pathway is, where it fits for a provider, why it matters for a system. And then below that, we have this interactive visual. It's a 90-second animation that was created, and it's really heartwarming and beautiful. We're very excited about it. And then further down on the page, there's some information about FAQs. So for example, who is this career pathway for? And that would be for childcare providers. Is the career pathway mandatory? No, it's not. Things like that, things that just came up throughout our feedback sessions that we just wanted to call out very clearly at the front. And then the second page, and I apologize that I can't get this to do what it needs to do. The second page is, we're just gonna abandon that. The second page goes over the actual tool itself. So that's where a provider can interface with the interactive version of the career pathway. It's also where they can choose to print off a PDF if they prefer to have it that way, where they can actually write on it. And then we also have on our third page, we have some information about how it fits into the larger system. So how it fits into like quality endeavors in Kansas, like our QRIS, and how it fits into other initiatives that are taking place. But again, this should be live here within a month. So hopefully you can see it for yourselves very soon. There we go. Here's a little bit more of it. That where it says, how does the career pathway help build careers? That's that animation video. And it just kind of talks about how how important childcare providers are, and how really you can be a childcare provider regardless of what your walk of life was before that, what your lived experiences are, because the expertise that you bring are so valuable. And then just to kind of wrap things up and pull everything together, another reason why this work is so important right now, so aside from the registry work, is that there's other investments being made. So completely independent of the career pathway work, the core competencies are going to be revised. Casito has been working on creating an individualized professional development plan, so that IPDP that will interface with the registry, but it needs to be informed by the career pathway parameters. We're also working with Child Care Aware of Kansas. They have graciously offered to assist us in creating a career guide or supplement. It'll just be like a 3-page, 2-page document, kind of showing profiles of various providers to articulate how diverse our workforce is. So that will be coming out soon, and we can't wait to share it with you. And then hopefully in the future, we'll be able to revamp the full career guide that many of you might be familiar with. I think it's 30 to 40 pages. It's a pretty lengthy document, but very, very helpful. We're also making some investments in those professional supports. So you should anticipate seeing scholarships coming out for things like CDA, maybe that NAFC cohort, things like that. And then also we're making allowances to prepare for the technical assistance that will be needed when the career pathway rolls out. And then of course the workforce registry, which we've talked about. So all of these things are really happening in tandem. And it seems like there's a lot taking place right now, because there is, and it's very exciting, but it's also very overwhelming. So I think it's most exciting that many of you have been part of this from the beginning. So you've seen so many different versions of the career pathway, maybe even the first one that we made that was in a Word document and it was just like blocks and it was very ugly. But this career pathway has been informed by all of you. So we've conducted, I think 20 plus feedback sessions. We've had feedback sessions with just providers, with just surveyors, specifically for Casito training staff. We've had feedback sessions with 2-year and 4-year higher education. So this whole process has really been very intentional to make sure that the people who know the information are informing the product. So from here, what will happen is the pathway will be released, like I talked about, in January with all of those accompanying documents. We will, in the interim, be working with our partners to make sure that we have some aligned messaging that they can share, and aligned verbiage. That's very important. We don't want confusion. And then the career pathway team that you know, so myself and backbone support from KU CPPR, we will move into more of a supportive role, and implementation will actually become the responsibility of another entity. And so this transition was very intentional, given that people who have subject matter expertise should be involved in informing actual implementation decisions and specific content related decisions. So that's why the transition is happening now. And we will continue to share with you any updates about what agency that will be, and the process and timeline, and how you can get involved and stay involved when we have it. If you have questions or if you have any feedback, please email me. I live and breathe all things career pathway and registry. So just anything that you want to know or any concern that you have, just email me. So a few things that we need to remind you of before we end today. The link that you're currently on for webinars will not work beyond January. Well, it will work, but it won't take you to a live webinar. So please go on to the Children's Cabinet website, and you need to actually manually re-register for the 2023 invitation. They're different. It's pretty clear on the website. If you haven't done that, please do it. so that we can continue to give you updates about webinar content and schedule, as well as just anything else that comes our way. And then our webinar for the 28th is canceled because hopefully most of you will be on vacation and enjoying your families and eating tons of food and not thinking about work. And so we will see you all again in January for webinars. And then another thing to share is moving forward, and I know we have it here, but moving forward, our early childhood group meetings will not be the way that we've been doing them. So we will schedule early childhood meetings when we have content to share, or we have a specific ask from the system or the workforce, but they will not continue the same bi-monthly cadence that they did with the cabinet meetings for 2023. So as always, thank you for attending. If you would like to get on the schedule for next year, please email me. If you have questions about the career pathway, please email me. And final reminder that ECBG application was extended until the 21st, not the 16th, at 5 p.m. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you next year.